So, in retrospect to the situation, I struggle with the situation in New Zealand where we like to make heroes and demons. Everyone's going to be the good guy, or they're going to be the bad guy, or they're going to be the bad guy, and they're going to be the good guy. That team's the winners, that's the losers. And of course, I'm talking about politics, red and blue. But kind of like in the United States of America, we have the same phenomena. Yes, on the surface, apparently there are differences. They quibble over things like budgets. Have duels over things which can't really be changed anyway. But really, when you look down the line, in terms of where was National on the position on Rocket Lab, which is a company which increasingly we're becoming clear is really just a weapons deployment system, thinly disguised as these New Zealand Herald soft diplomacy pages like not I was going to say Team New Zealand, but I actually mean the America's Cup technology taking us into space. What you actually mean is billionaires and tax cheats technology used, sponsored by psychopathic emirate dictators, launching us into the weapons nuclear, basically creating weapons that have breached our nuclear-free policy twice. And that was under Jacinda Ardern. So, National kind of heralded in, yeah, cool, let's bring back the favourite right, which, of course, nobody mentions the fact that Rocket Lab was actually seed funded by the biggest bunch of tax evaders on New Zealand history. So embarrassing that they disappeared off to Switzerland and got up to all sorts of shenanigans. And New Zealand media being New Zealand media, we never bothered to keep track of them. We just let them drift out of our brains, and then they snuck back in, and then they give us Rocket Lab. And when they told the people in the Habus in Mahia Peninsula that it wouldn't be used for war, it wouldn't be polluting the environment, and all lies. So, of course, we got Judah Collins just turning around leading $50 million to basically the Ukraine. And I'll backtrack on that a second again about the whole arms sales. At the same time, Jacinda Ardern was going, oh, no, it's terrible, Russia, evil Russia, evil Russia, which is just absolute neoliberal crap. I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible, but this is anybody who actually buys this stuff up. And people are starting to realise that the Ukraine war has been another serial corporate lie, just like Vietnam, just like Iraq, in fact, just like all the wars out there. And the history, of course, is 1990. Americans said to the Russians, okay, the Russians said, hey, we want to normalise relationships. The Americans said, it's cool, we won't move an inch eastward. Turned around, the wall came down. Basically, the West turned around, put a gun to the Russians' head, said, if you don't turn around fully privatised, then we're not going to give you loans and you're going to be in the crap. And they basically went into procedure to actually massively privatise and economically rape the former USSR. Stupid as they expanded into NATO, despite having said repeatedly again and again they wouldn't. And of course, the Belarus event in 1990, which is the excuse of the conflict in that area to expand NATO, put a very, very big base basically into NATO, allow them to kind of effectively try and squeeze the Russians out of the connection between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, Sevastopol, I think. But that was the point. They were trying to actually just curtain the Russians in. Iraq again was launched on an absolute pretense. And then, they kept on expanding. And you went, oh, wow, you don't expect Russians to be upset by that? And Henry Kissinger, again, if you are a left-wing and liberal, you should immediately know that name, and you should immediately know that he is involved. This is not the path of righteous and good behaviour. Of course, he turned around and he basically says, hey, we're on top of the world, let's just carry on. We'll just crush those Russians and turn them into a third world party, and never mind to destroy the whole stability of this new era, which could have been one of actual genuine peace. Going 2014, they had elections, fully recognised elections, CIA coup, Americans get caught carrying out the coup, and they still go, screw you. And again, none of that gets reported in our mainstream media. And of course, Jacinda, if she was this wonderful, caring, kind person, and truly left-wing leaning and liberal progressive, she'd know all this history. She was the Prime Minister, she's got access to all the information in the world. But no, she decided to keep selling us the lies, the same kind of warmongering lies that National sells us. Fast forward, right now her brand's been pushed massively, and people complained the other day because tax users and National have been using government funding to promote their candidates, and I think that's wrong, by the way, to be quite clear, and anyone knows me, I am not ACT or National. But again, we see massive amounts of money being spent on brand, just on Ardern, and again, when things like Graham Norton, it's not Graham Norton, we just got on board because she's such a caring and beautiful, amazing woman. Never mind that Graham Norton actually owns a winery with Rachel Kuliana. I think that's how you pronounce it. Basically, John Key's hitman. Remember, it was John Key and Helen Clark got together. Basically, the National Labour joined forces to kind of try and get New Zealand into the top position on the United Nations, and they didn't get it. But this is what they're trying to do now, get Jacinda Ardern at the top of the United Nations. So there she is. There's Rachel Giliana on the New Zealand Society, which is again connected to also connected to the New Zealand Embassy, and of course Rachel Giliana has been involved in hosting Soranis, I think it's an arms company which is basically New Zealand is helping sell arms or drones to the UK, which again I'm going to be doing a bit of a big deep dive on that particular company. So again it comes back to trying to promote New Zealand so they can, oh, this is great, aren't we wonderful, we're all part of the NATO alliance. Let's get involved in a war with Russia, even though it's actually bankrupting both sides. And really, when you actually work out, the only one that's actually really winning out of all of this is actually China. Nothing against China personally, but that's just how the dominoes are actually falling. And again, we said there was Trade New Zealand story. They're hosting again Graham Horton, New Zealand brand, which is tracking down to Hamilton, and I'm still got to trace that one down because there is lots of hinkiness around that particular brand. But always pop-up brands popping up to go, oh, isn't Jacinda Ardern? And you trace them back, and they actually, trace back to basically, the big money. And it's the big money that was behind the TPA and wanted the flag change. And again, that's the TPA that John Key and Jacinda Ardern passed together. So again against her Liberal, remember Labor said they're going to walk away from the TPPA, and then she turned around and probably did it. And not one of her fans, cheerleaders, have turned around and said, well, for progressive Liberal, that's pretty pro-corporate. That's right up there with basically her sniffing the underpanties of BlackRock in New York. BlackRock, in case you didn't know, is 45% owned by Merrill Lynch, the bank that John Key previously worked for. Which reminds me again, and while I'm at it, New York Brits, again, one of the platforms you find out there promoting Jacinda Ardern, and that's actually tied up linked into Sir William Sargent, the former public relations expert she trained under when she was helping sell the UK version of Rogernomics, known as the Third Wave, for Tony Blair when she was senior policy advisor for the Better Business Bureau, where again her job was helping basically privatise assets. Oh, it sounds incredibly liberal, it sounds incredibly progressive, doesn't it? And of course, that was the flag debate, afterwards, which Labour and National said, oh, we both want the flag debate. Oh, going, well, why would you want something that ultimately is about undermining the sovereignty of New Zealand? Oh, but that's time we cut the curtains with England. Sorry, but the Union Jack hasn't actually got anything to do with Buckingham Palace. It's got to do with Westminster and our laws. And if you want to change the flag, and by the way, changing the flag doesn't make the change occur. There's a whole bunch of things, but it's a step. Okay, and when you look at the steps, which include the Constitutional Panel and, as I said, the New Zealand flag referendum, you find the same particular vested interests, which are all again very large pro-TPA, which I said, Jacinda gave Phil Goff, a dyed-in-the-wool neoliberal who she trained under when she came back from New York, where she was working for the Soup Kitchen, which is actually the Robin Hood Foundation, which is John Griffin, Glenn Dobin, one of Epstein's mates, and basically John Griffin's mate of the Wizard of Wall Street, Julian Roberts, again the guy that John Key got together with to and said, oh, we're just going to turn New Zealand into a bolt hole. So when you guys have, look like you're going to be lynched by your own people, you can come down here, you can have your mansions, and we welcome your investment. We don't care how much blood is actually on your money. Just like again, like the old America's Cup situation, and of course. National gets out and Labor still carries on this whole kind of golden passport. In other words, you turn up with money, lots and lots of money, we'll welcome and you can have a complete house. Never mind that we know that you'll actually instantaneously start getting involved in local politics. So unfortunately we're in this very, very sad world where the New Zealand Initiative basically is controlling mostly our major parties, and everybody in all the political parties are pretending that this is not the case. So we don't really have any opposition, we've just got bitches of the New Zealand Initiative. And I'll leave you with that lovely thought.